All right. Our next speaker is an activist, artist, and writer currently living in Kansas City, Missouri. Her activism focuses on feminism, racism, mass incarceration, sex worker rights and safety, destigmatizing mental illness, and eating disorder awareness. Please welcome to the Skepticon 10 stage, Nikki Jane.
Hi guys, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. So, as she said, my name is Nikki. I am going to be speaking on mental health and the Black community and what it looks like in the Black community. So, I'm going to start off a little bit about myself. I grew up here in Missouri. The reason this topic is really close to me is because I've dealt with mental health issues since I was little. My mom told me once, as young as 4, I was telling her that I hated myself and that I was ugly. Like, nobody told me that. I just randomly started saying it. By 8, I was telling her I was sad all the time. I didn't understand why. And my parents just kind of brushed it off. My dad would always tell me, "Why are you sad? You know, I give you everything. Like, you live in a nice house. You're spoiled. You have no reason to be sad." And so I kind of just internalized that and felt guilty for it, because he was right. I was very spoiled. I was the only child. My parents, I could literally cry and my dad would give me money. So I didn't understand it. But by 15, it had gotten worse, and I attempted suicide for the first time. So I'm 27 now. I still struggle with mental health. This has actually been one of my probably hardest years, next to the year I lost my mom with depression. So it's been kind of rough. But that's why this topic is so important to me, and I wanted to speak about it. So I've realized and noticed too in the past few years that suicide and the topic of mental health has become it's been becoming a conversation in society. Like, when I was a teenager, we didn't really speak about it. But I also remember when I was a teenager, to write "Love on Her Arms" was kind of blowing up back in MySpace days. So it was slowly starting a conversation. But recently, it's become a more prominent topic, especially I've noticed in music and hip hop, which is big in the Black community. And so I actually have a video to show you guys about that. And then we'll get to the rest of this. Eventually.
Prominent topic in hip-hop right now, with rappers of all different lanes expressing their views on mental health. Recently, Logic performed his suicide prevention track 1-800-273-8255 on the MTV VMA stage, bringing many in the audience to tears. Lil Uzi Vert sang of contemplating death over a failing relationship on his hit EXO Tour Life. And throughout XXXTentacion's latest album, 17, he raps about the tragic suicide of his close friend Jocelyn Flores.
She just sent back at a phone call. Girl that you fuck with, kill herself. That was this summer and nobody helped. And ever since then, when I hate myself, when the fucking ended.
There was also his controversial Instagram video where he simulated his own hanging. But it's not just the new kids on the scene. Styles P was moved to tears during a Breakfast Club interview in August while speaking about the suicide of his daughter.
It's difficult as a Black man, because we come up in households where we don't really pay attention to family issues. Like, we so much on the hustle and trying to get the money that family becomes second and money becomes first.
And Joe Budden recently broke down during a taping of Complex's everyday struggle.
As somebody who's been suicidal, as somebody who has battled depression, I would like to see hip hop address it more. We're so powerful as a culture. Like Ho said in the interview, we move things. Enough of us have died from mental health issues for us to look into it.
Sadly, Budden's words ring true. Hip-hop artists have not been immune to the most serious manifestations of mental health issues. Amongst them, up-and-comer Capital Steez, who jumped to his death in 2012. Eminem attempted to overdose on Tylenol in 1997. And on Solange's 2016 album, A Seat at the Table, Lil Wayne confessed to a failed suicide attempt of his own.
When I attempted suicide, I didn't die. I remember how mad I was on that day. Man, you gotta let it go before I get up in the way. Let it go, let it go.
While dismal conditions in life, love, or career are often factors, even those living the life in rap have struggled with depression and suicide. For example, Kendrick Lamar, who's admired in music for his success and composure, dealt with his own issues. On the song You, Kendrick revealed it wasn't his life, but the grim state of others' lives that guilted him into depression.
And if this marriage could talk it and say you gotta go, and if I told your secrets, the world of no money can't stop a suicidal weakness.
And things is happening back home in my city or in my family that I can't do nothing about. It's out of my control. I can put it in God's hands. I couldn't understand that. And that can draw a thin line, you know, between you having your sanity and you losing it.
And although it may seem these mentions of suicide and depression in rap are new, MCs of every generation have been expressing these sentiments for years.
I often drift when I drive, having fatal thoughts of suicide. Bang and get it over with. And then I'm worry-free, but that's bullshit.
Swear to God, I wanna just slip my wrist and end this bullshit. Throw the magnum to my head, threaten the bullshit.
Your steering wheel in my hand, trying to hold it steady. Anything in my way is dead, cause that's the way I feel I am already.
So much pressure in this life of mine. I cried times I once contemplated suicide and would have tried, but when I held that knife, all I could see was my mama's eyes.
Now this would be a beautiful death, jumping out the window.
Can't understand what I'm saying, can't figure out what I'm implying. If you feel you don't wanna be alive, you feel just how I am.
Contemplation of an ending with this pistol to my temple, thinking if I pull this trigger, will it send me, take my misery away? Or would I just be killing me in vain?
The violence and the lies slipped suicide into my mental health. I did acid in the studio one day and almost killed myself.
These lyrics can serve as therapy for artists, as Kevin Gates explains.
I just make music.
So you just keep going.
I have to make music. It's therapeutic to me.
Yeah.
You know, I suffer from severe cases of depression.
Yeah.
So that's my only way to vent. That's my only way to release, is through making music.
Listening back, it's surprising the public hasn't shown more concern for rappers. Still, the Bond fans build with those who open up on the subject is like no other. Take Kid Cudi, who's been very vocal on his fight with suicidal thoughts.
And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take, 'cause I'm ready for a funeral.
Supposed to go and try some coke, and a happy ending be slitting my throat. So young am I, and my mom's calling, think I should decline. I'm faced while I'm thinking about suicide.
You know, loneliness is a terrible, terrible thing, man. And if you don't know how to conquer it, it can eat you alive.
As he's grappled with suicide and depression himself, many, including celebs and peers, credit Cudi's openness with the subject with helping them face their own issues.
Why you like Kid Cudi so much?
You saved my life. I would have killed myself if I didn't have Kid Cudi. There's me. If you're 25 and under, I truly believe that Kid Cudi saved your life.
Kid Cudi, man. Kid Cudi's like really like one of the main dudes I kind of like looked at and listened to all the time. He saved my life. He saved me from doing like random bad things to myself.
Most recently, Chester Bennington of Linkin Park committed suicide, and former collaborator Jay-Z spoke to Rap Radar on the effect of suffering while in plain sight.
That's not normal for 10,000, 20,000 people to be like screaming at you. That's not a normal thing to deal with. So then you add that on top. So now you got to start masking your pain because you can't let all these people see. Like, it's hard enough to talk to your family.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard enough for people to like talk about real shit with their family. 6 people at a table, and it's like, I can't speak about this. Imagine have to speak in front of the world.
Right.
As of 2015, suicide has been the second leading cause of death for people ages 15 to 34 in the United States. With hip-hop now reigning as the biggest genre in music, artists' voices are not only speaking for themselves, but for the many listeners who feel voiceless. I'm Jacques Morel with Genius News, bringing you the meaning and the knowledge behind the music. Peace.
So what's good about this topic becoming more prominent and artists and celebrities using their voice to speak out is after Logic's song was released, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline their calls rose by 27%, and visits to their site increased from 300,000 to 400,000. And after his MTV performance, they reported a 50% increase in calls. So we're making moves. That's a good thing. And after Kid Cudi last year spoke about entering rehab for suicidal thoughts and depression, he posted a Facebook status about this. Twitter blew up with a viral hashtag, YouGoodMan. Around centering around Black men and the topic of mental health. Many sharing their stories about how they didn't feel like they could speak about their mental health growing up and how it just wasn't allowed in our community. And how anytime they brought it up, it was just pushed aside. Which is, I can't say it's completely wrong. So according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, about 16.8% of Black Americans have reported living with a mental illness, but only 16% report getting help. And studies show Black men often experience more mental problems due to racism. So with an increase in police brutality in the past few years, we have to wonder what kind of impact that's making on the community as a whole. In a study published in the American Journal of Public Health noted that those who reported police contact experience more symptoms of anxiety and PTSD. So why aren't more seeking help? I mean, it could lead to a few things. One, the stigma attached to treatment. Up until the past decade or so, or really the past few years, getting help was a sign of weakness. And even now, some people see it that way, which is understandable. And I've noticed too, I had this conversation not too long ago with a friend after the death of Chester Bennington about mental health and how it gets harder to deal with the older you get. You kind of just realize, you kind of think that maybe there's no point in getting help. Like you kind of feel I should have it together by now, you know? And that's like a hard part I've realized and kind of noticed among other people in my life. Is like when you're younger, you think, oh, if I just change these things, if I, you know, give myself time to grow up, if I get a job, maybe if I get married, if I create a better life for myself, things will get better. But then you grow up and these opportunities happen and you do make better changes in your life and you still feel this way. There's not always information on how to get help. It is pretty hard because it's not always something we bring up. We don't always look at mental health as something as important as your physical health. Some people just don't know where to turn. And if you live in smaller cities too, like Springfield for instance, it's not always readily available, and without insurance, it's also really expensive. Luckily, being in KC, I've noticed that there are quite a few city-funded organizations that offer therapy and just treatment in general, but it's still hard to get into these places usually. You have to call multiple times sometimes. You have to make an appointment weeks out, which can hinder your process of getting help. Sometimes if you have to wait that long, you just think, okay, what's the point? Or you get better for a while and you think, oh, I'm fine, I don't need help. And then you hit another low, which is common among people with mental health problems. Also, simply just a mistrust of providers. With a lack of Black therapists, it's hard sometimes to seek help as a Black individual because some individuals want therapists that look like themselves, especially when speaking on issues of racism and issues within our community, police brutality, etc. It's hard to sometimes connect to people that don't deal with the same things you deal with, that don't look like you. And so it's understandable as to why some people just brush off getting help when that's not there. But in 2015, like the video said, suicide was the second leading cause of death among Americans from 15 to 34. And in 2016, the CDC reported that the suicide rate in America was at a 30-year high, and found that suicide rates among Black men were increasing. Black men and women are more likely to attempt Black women are more likely to attempt suicide than Black men. And suicide is the 16th leading cause of death for Black people of all ages, and the third leading cause of death for Black males between the ages of 15 and 24. So even though this is a silent issue in our community, it's obviously a problem and a topic we need to address more often, which, coming from a Black household, I understand is hard. So I guess, like, what can we do to improve that? Conversations, definitely. I understand, like, it's rough. When I first attempted suicide at 15, I remember, and I hate saying this because my dad and I have like a really good relationship these days. Definitely, he's one of my best friends. I lost my mom in 2012, so my dad is pretty much all I have. But I remember my dad staying outside the hospital room with my mom, and he said I was just doing it for attention. And he continued to kind of have this attitude, and it was kind of just ignored in our house altogether until I was about 17 and I was checked into the hospital for a week. due to a suicide attempt and an eating disorder. And when I was there, they diagnosed me with depression, bipolar disorder, and bulimia, and my dad finally came around, and slowly has been. So conversations are definitely important. These days, I feel like I can now come to my dad and be like, hey, I'm just not doing too well, like my depression is acting up. And though we may not have the most in-depth conversations, it's not a dismissive topic anymore. It's like, okay, I get that. I may not understand it, but okay, like I see where you're at. So I just think it's really important that we start having these conversations more. Obviously, this is a very rough thing in our community, and it's very important, as we saw from the video too, that this is obviously a lot of people are dealing with it. So I am going to cut this short and end this early, but I want to end this by saying that I think it's really important to seek help. There's nothing shameful about seeking help at all. And I have said this quote so many times the past few years to myself, but it's okay to not be okay. And I think that's important to remember. It's okay to not be okay all the time. You're not always going to be 100%. That doesn't mean you're not in recovery. That doesn't mean you're weak. It's okay. So, thanks, guys.